Hello and welcome to another edition of the Stench of Truth. This will be the income inequality issue of this show, and I want to say that it's not surprising that the mainstream media has had to cover this issue, even though this has been an issue for years and years and decades. And finally, they are forced to comment upon it simply by virtue of the fact that it is so blatantly obvious everywhere you turn. Now, this caused some consternation on my part when I noticed that some Tea Party wacko fucking retarded motherfucker is once again trying to make it a priority to get a bill passed to put further restrictions on people's SNAP access by requiring identification, which in and of itself does not sound like a big deal, but just the same way as requiring identification for people who go to vote disproportionately disenfranchises fucking poor and elderly people who sometimes do not have identification because they don't drive, they don't have a car, etc. They don't need it. It makes it more difficult. Why? Why is this fucking necessary? Because of the ubiquitous term of fraud. And I broke this down on Facebook the other day. In 2008, the General Accounting Office came up with an estimate of 1 cent on a dollar for fraud. For fraud within the SNAP program, okay? Now, in that same year, $34 billion was spent on SNAP benefits. So 1 cent on a dollar would give you $340 million, which, when you compare it to one motherfucking greedy fuck corporation like G-fucking-E, General motherfucking Electric, who has outsourced almost all of its fucking jobs overseas because profit is the only thing that matters to these motherfucking jagoffs. All right? GE not only did not pay the $5 or so billion that they would have had to pay on their profits at a 35% tax rate, but they got out of that, but they also got a tax credit of something like $3 billion. So, let's compare the tax-cheating, non-tax fucking paying corporation motherfuckers. One example, one motherfucking company who is not contributing $8 fucking billion in the same year of 2008. Compare 8 billion to 340 million, you motherfucker. And when you cocksuckers sit up there and talk about, ooh, fraud with your penny-pinching motherfucking grubby hands, it makes me want to kick you in your fucking balls. And that's all these people do, is go after the poor and the fucking defenseless. Because they know the score. They know that big money, wealth, and giant corporations and banks run every fucking thing and tell these cocksuckers what to fucking do. So they're not going to talk about corporate taxes except to lower them. Because God knows that the 35% tax rate these people are not currently paying right now. Let's lower it more so that they cannot pay the new lower fucking rate. What fucking sense does that make? You fucking assholes. So, oh, they're the job creators. I forgot about that. Don't make me fucking vomit on camera. So, wealth inequality. The worst in history in this country right now in the United States. The worst anywhere ever in the history of fucking humanity that we're aware of. The wealth disparity between the top, very small part of 1% and the rest of us. And everything that has been going on within the government has only perpetuated this and guaranteed that it will get worse. You will not hear a single politician, except for a couple of grandstanders who are going to come out and try to make this into something just to serve their own fucking purposes. You will not hear a politician come up with any concrete ideas that would affect this issue and try to do something about it. Now, a couple things that were brought up to me when I posted that I was going to be doing a video tonight was a guaranteed income. And this is something that was being considered, I believe, in Switzerland, I think, relatively recently. That was last year or the year before, where people are guaranteed a certain level of income, and it's not necessarily tied to your job. Well, of course, you still work, you make wage, etc. But a state-sponsored, guaranteed basic income level so that people can fucking survive. Let's not forget, there's an underbelly of poor in this society that is routinely forgotten and not talked about. And these are people who are without anything. But of course, you'll hear the talking head fuck faces talk about how, oh, the poor in this country, they got everything. And then you'll hear a talk show host have people on talk about how, oh, the welfare people come in and they buy all this stuff that they shouldn't be buying, and it's cheating and scamming and everything else. But you'll never hear any one of these motherfuckers talk about the thievery and theft that go on at fucking major corporations and goddamn banks that fucking rape us every goddamn day, every fucking chance they get, because the only fucking thing they care about is fucking profit, and they'll throw you into a goddamn oven if it means they can make 2 more fucking cents on their fucking shares. You're never going to hear people talk about real issues. Well, you know what? Another thing that came up was this idea of matching the minimum wage to the productivity gains that have continued every year since the 70s. Productivity amongst workers in United States Incorporated has increased every year. Every single year since the 70s, I believe. There may be some anomalies in there. Okay, I haven't looked at the statistics in a while, but productivity has increased every year. Wages have remained completely flat. So if we peg the minimum wage to the productivity gains, we would see a minimum wage that would be $20-something an hour, which sounds about right to me, because you have to have a minimum wage in this country of at least $15 an hour. Of at least $15 an hour to have a hope. To have a hope. That's only a hope of being able to get by. But if anything is done with minimum wage, it will be too little, far fucking too little, and far fucking too late to have any effect in the immediate term. We need an instantaneous increase in minimum wage. Okay. Now, as far as a basic income strategy, that would require a lot of logistics. And of course, when you have a completely dysfunctional government that is dysfunctional on purpose and only on the surface, because all of these fucks in Washington only want one thing. That is to promote the global corporate fucking takeover, of which United States Incorporated's military-industrial complex is the brute force enforcer of. Period. End of fucking discussion. Now, that's the only thing they care about. That's why the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and the Atlantic Partnership that they're trying to come up with, that's why all of these things are trying to be wrangled in secret, behind closed doors, and all of this bullshit surrounding them, because they're absolutely monstrous giveaways to corporations. Okay? You're never going to, in this kind of environment, come up with a situation where you can have enacted a way in which people are guaranteed a basic minimum life-sustaining income, okay, through a government mechanism of some kind, although I'd be completely in support of that. I would also be completely in support of looking at the productivity gains of the workforce in this country and pegging the minimum wage to that to get it up into the $20 an hour range, okay? Now, this issue is more about what people have and don't want to contribute than it is about people who don't have and who are trying to cheat or rob or whatever. That's always the red herring. That's always the flag that they want to throw out. So, yes, there are people who are on food stamps, who are on various kinds of government assistance of whatever type, that game the system. But how much are they gaming the fucking system? How much is it costing? When you compare it to the massive fucking bank fucking explosion that happened in 2008, where these banks ended up getting trillions of fucking dollars from the Federal Reserve because of their fraud, their theft, their outright fucking scheming. This is the kind of fraud that you need to get your eyes on. And I haven't even looked into this yet, but I guarantee you that government contractor fraud is massive. And if you compare government contractor, private contractors for the government, if you compare the fraud, the waste, and the abuse in the entire bidding process and the amount of money that these people make, I guarantee you that $340 million of 2008 will be a drop in a fucking bucket. But none of these people are going to talk about that. You're never going to hear that. But that's what needs to be talked about. Okay? Raising the minimum wage immediately to at least $15 an hour. Now, I'll tell you something else. The Federal Reserve needs to be nationalized. It needs to be nationalized, and that central bank needs to be forced to retire all of the debt that it has on the United States and start issuing credit to states and municipalities in order to restart a complete overhaul of the infrastructure in this fucking country. And furthermore, protective tariff, okay? Fuck the TPP and fuck these free trade agreements. We need a protective tariff that will raise income. And I'll tell you what, we need penalty tariffs against companies that outsource or take their jobs elsewhere. And I'll tell you something else. Just like with Boeing up in Washington, blackmailing the fucking union and using political figures and starting up a grassroots organization to try to keep Boeing in Washington so that they would make their airplanes there instead of moving to, I think it was South Carolina, okay, to a non-union plant. They were forced and shafted into voting again on a contract that they rejected because of the nefarious actions of the fucking corporation. Now, this is after, of course, Boeing has received massive fucking tax giveaways from the state. This is another issue right here. This farming around that corporations do to find the best deal. Where can I go that they're going to give me the best tax break, that they're going to build me the facilities that I need? That is, the local communities, the local state, whatever, is going to be paying out to put in infrastructure, to put in roads, to put in fucking all the shit that this company needs, only to have them fucking say, fuck you, state of whatever you are. I'm going down there because my profits will be $10 higher by going down there. Or I'm moving there because they don't have unions. You understand? We need an exit tax. We need an exit tax for these corporations. You move out of my state, especially if I have paid to put your fucking facility in there, you're getting hit with a fucking penalty. And it's going to be fucking substantial. That's it. And if it requires that the state, eminent domain, every fucking bit of property that those motherfuckers have in that fucking state, then so be it. Because all you are a bunch of fucking criminal motherfuckers. No more shopping around for the best tax break and the best deal, only to cut and run whenever you can find a better profit deal down the road somewhere. Fuck you, motherfuckers. Raise the minimum wage. We need to expand Social Security. Social Security needs to be increased dramatically. And don't tell me there's no fucking money for it. When you can go to war on a moment's notice because we have so much fucking money pouring into a boondoggle of military-industrial complex that is completely fucking unnecessary. Once you nationalize the Federal Reserve, you can fund anything. You can increase Social Security benefits. You can double them. You can triple them. To give people the benefit of living out their fucking retirements. Yes, people should save more. But how can you save more when your wages have not increased in decades? And how can you save more whenever anywhere you put fucking money to fucking save it, it ends up being raped and pillaged from you? Viz. the 401k fucking meltdown. Why do you think everybody is desperate to get rid of defined benefit pension plans? Because if they have a defined contribution plan, that doesn't say anything about what you're going to end up with. It's not their responsibility. They put in a couple pennies up front. You put it into some whatever. Invest in a stock market, which is in a huge bubble. Oh yeah, we had this little slight correction this week, but that's nothing compared to what needs to happen because the Dow Jones is overpriced by thousands of fucking dollars. I'll tell you that much right now. You want to talk about bubble economics? That's what we got. So you nationalize the Federal Reserve, you can pay for anything. You can pay for Medicare for all, for everybody in this fucking country, and tell every one of these motherfucking thieves in the fucking insurance industry, go pound salt, fuckers. You could pay for expanding Social Security. You could pay for infrastructure in this country. You could pay for all of the things that need to be done. You know what else is a good idea? Take all those foreclosed upon homes that are in your particular municipalities and cities around this country. Use eminent domain to take them from the banks who probably stole them from the people who were rightfully living in them through fraudulent mortgage applications and all the other bullshit fucking packaged fucking commodity bullshit that led to the fucking collapse in 2008. That's still going on now. Eminent domain, every one of those fucking things. Tell them motherfucking banks, go fuck yourself, motherfuckers. Take those homes and give them to people who need them. Give them free of charge. And you know what else? How about a debt fucking jubilee? You're never going to hear anything about that. How about you pass some kind of law that says, well, if you owe a debt for a certain period of time, it's done away with. Or how about forcing credit card companies to forgive all of the consumer debt in this country so that people can start out on a level playing field? How about forcing credit card companies to get rid of ridiculous, exorbitant, usurious fucking interest rates by putting a cap on it at like 10%, which is probably still too much, but compared to what you have to deal with now, with penalty rates like 39 fucking percent, your credit card's going to be like a payday loan pretty soon because they don't do shit about it. You have to realize that people who live without adequate income have to use that credit. If you're a rich motherfucker who drives a goddamn jet to fucking work or takes a weekend trip to Paris on your private fucking jet, you probably don't have a credit card bill. You probably just pay it off. I mean, you probably only use a credit card because some things require a credit card, like renting a car, like if you would even need to do that, or getting on a plane, whatever. You know, getting plane fare. Okay, you might need that in certain situations. Otherwise, what the fuck? So yeah, I support all of these things, but you hear that what I come back to over and over and over again is how to pay for this. Okay, nationalizing Federal Reserve. But that's not all. Understand? These motherfuckers who have preyed upon not only the people in this fucking corporate country, but everywhere else around the world where we're spreading the plague of corporatism and this hegemony of the corporatists around the fucking world that USA Inc.'s military arm has been doing. These corporations, these banks, all of these people need to pay. They need to pay for the massive fraud that they perpetrated on the people in this country. They need to pay for hijacking the government of this fucking country. Okay? So, Wall Street sales tax? Absolutely. Absolutely. Every fucking transaction. That includes all of the thousands of transactions that are conducted by your fucking supercomputers at JP Morgan and all these other fucking houses that are trying to squeeze out half cents and quarter pennies here and there with their thousands of trade a second. You trade that stock that second, you're fucking getting taxed on that motherfucker. 1 fucking %. 1 fucking %. And not only do you not reduce the corporate tax rate, I don't even think we need to raise it. I think we just need to say, get rid of every fucking loophole, tax dodge, and everything else, and require these corporations to pay the absolute rate that at what it is, 35%. You pay that on your profits. End of fucking discussion. I don't want to hear anything about anything else. Your profits, at the end of the year, 35%, I'm happy with that. Okay? Start paying into the fucking system. Especially the freeloader motherfuckers who take every fucking thing that they can maneuver the government into giving to them, while at the same time fucking over their fucking workers and forcing their workers to rely on government assistance. So they need to pay. Just some of the issues. Income inequality, it's going to continue because there is no impetus within the government of this country, wholly owned subsidiary of multinational corporations and banks, to address this issue, because it requires that those people start paying. And they have to pay a lot, because there's a lot to fucking pay back. This is an issue whose time has come. And I've outlined some ways in which this can be addressed. But you're not going to hear this being talked about by anybody you're not going to hear the solutions talked about. Instead, you're going to hear radical right-wing motherfucking wacko fuck jobs talk about, oh, we need to tighten down on that SNAP fraud. Oh, do you really? Do you really? Well, then how about doing something about GE sending thousands of jobs overseas and not only not paying $5 billion in tax that they should have been paying, but also getting a $3 billion tax credit in 2008. And I'm sure this year will probably be about the same. Okay? So fuck you. And fuck all of you motherfuckers who want to look at the poor for the penny that they may be committing fraud with, and refuse to look at the billions of dollars, the trillions of dollars on the other side of that spectrum. Fuck all of you guys. If you can't see basic human common fucking decency, and you want to continue this same fucking mantra that I hear over and over and over again from the ogres, the trolls, and the fucking dickheads who want to deny you unemployment insurance, that want to take away your food stamps, that dismantle the welfare system, that are trying to attack Social Security, that are trying to privatize military pensions. How about that one too? Thank you, soldiers. Now your money can go into the stock market and be lost, and you can end up with nothing and homeless too. Just like many of you already are. Thank you for your fucking service. That's what you get out of corporate USA Incorporated. Make the fuckers pay. Nationalize the Federal Reserve. Expand Social Security. Get rid of this fucking Affordable Care Act bullshit. Medicare for all. Okay? Infrastructure redevelopment. Wall Street sales tax. Get rid of all the fucking loopholes for corporations. And you get a penalty tax. If you outsource, you're taxed at a absolutely exorbitant rate. If you leave a state that you've negotiated some sweet deal to put your factory in and you decide to leave, you're getting fucking burned, buddy. You're getting burned because we're getting that money back. And if that means we have to eminent domain every single fucking thing you own in that fucking state and take it, then that's what we're gonna fucking do. So fuck you. No more fucking games. You start playing by the motherfucking rules. Because we're gonna be watching you. Because you're the ones that have brought this on. You brought this on, you have perpetuated it, you've made it the worst it has been in history. And now someone has to pay for it, and it's going to be you. Now that's whether it's going to be voluntarily or involuntarily. Somebody needs to get their head out of their ass and realize that people are starting to look at the true culprits. We see you. And there's going to be a reckoning. I don't know how it's going to come, but it's going to come, by God, and you're going to see it. Thank you.